Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Occupy Wall Street. It is the dominant story these last hours. Occupy Ann Arbor, Occupy Santa Fe, Occupy Portland, other college towns. Wall Street is not a college town. There are a lot of college students in New York. And I'm joined tonight by a member of the congressional delegation from New York, Nan Hayworth, who represents 19 New York. A number of people work on Wall Street in your district, Nan. You are very familiar with Wall Street. You're often in Manhattan. Occupy Wall Street has a sentimental appeal to me. I'm a little older than you and Nan. I remember occupying the Washington Mall in October of 1969. First, your thoughts about Occupy Wall Street, these young people. To your mind, are these young people earnest? Are they sincere? Are they filled with energy and hope? Good evening, Nan.
Good evening, John. And certainly I would very much like to attribute sincerity to the young men and women who are occupying Wall Street. I think they are susceptible to manipulation. There is no question. So we very much, and their presence there is an indication of how much we need leadership. We need leadership for our economy so that these young people, instead of feeling that they should be spending their days protesting certain developments in our economy and misattributing certain aspects, I would venture to say as well, but they should be occupied productively. And I think they are definitely subject to manipulation. If we have a leader of our economy, of our nation, of the free world, who insists on exhorting them, if you will, to look toward the men and women who work on Wall Street, who are presumably picking their way through these crowds, to look at them as, if you will, the message we're getting from the president is that they are parasitic.
Right. It's class warfare. He talks about millionaires and billionaires. And of course, everybody who works on Wall Street is worth $1 million. I know this. That's why they spend their time at Starbucks at lunchtime. Nan, in 1969, I was manipulated. It was the anti-war years. And I went to Washington and I protested Richard Nixon. What it got me was 5 more years of war. Mm-hmm. And as a young person, I was alienated, the usual. But mostly I was looking to meet girls. Okay, so that's okay when you're 21 years old. However, Occupy Wall Street is now in the hands of men and women who are not 21 years old. We saw public unions participating in some of the demonstrations, not all of them. And we saw, as you mentioned, the President of the United States, if not embracing the occupiers, certainly acknowledging what you'd have to say is an alienation that's present. All right. Do the Democrats gain from this? I'm looking for the game here, Nan. I'm a cynical person. Right. Are they looking to make Wall Street's occupiers into the Tea Party of 2011?
I look at that 2 ways, John. Are they seeking to use this for political gain? Yes, absolutely. Will this benefit them ultimately? No, it will not. This kind of attitude, this pitting of American against American, and more perniciously than that for the future of the young protesters, this effort to make our economy even more dependent on the whims of the federal government by taking power away from our enterprise sector will ultimately cost them dearly. It will cost these young people dearly in opportunity. We have 14 million Americans who need jobs, as you know, John, and 10 million more at least who are underemployed. And encouraging an attitude which looks at enterprise and looks at initiative and looks at profit, if you will, as evil instead of as a social good, so long as the finger's not on the scale from a federal government getting too involved in picking winners and losers. So long as the federal government takes that attitude about enterprise, about productivity, we're going to come to greater sorrow. And that is a terrible loss.
Picking winners and losers. Nan is an agreeable guest. She segues for me. Picking winners and losers. We go to Solyndra, 1,100 people laid off, a $500 million loan, the government now acknowledging mistakes were made. These were decisions that were made in early 2009. There was a panic. The market was crashing. However, Solyndra was never going to be a winner. Now the President of the United States is acknowledging that he was taking risks, that green jobs are not going to be the immediate way out of this. Solyndra also looks to many to be malfeasance. I don't see that, Nan. What I see instead is an administration that was hasty, that didn't do due diligence. Do you see anything else?
John, I see naivete at best and malfeasance at worst, and I think there is a mingling of the two here. It is clear from what is emerging from the memoranda that are being released, that are being requisitioned, if you will, for oversight, that people knew, but the White House insisted that they proceed with this effort. Right. This was a crushing and unconscionable squandering of resources at a time when we desperately need dollars to flow and working capital to flow back into the economy. That is $500 million of waste, and it is absolutely, it's heartbreaking. 1,100
people lost their jobs as well. 1,100 people who thought they were fully employed by a company that was endorsed by the President of the United States. We see this from the memos you talk about. Valerie Jarrett, the President's representative to the business community, was in on these on the email chain. Now, we don't have all the facts. I just mentioned Solyndra because the President and the Vice President have talked about green jobs for years. Where are they, Nan? Do you find them in Congress? Is your desk green in Congress?
Well, green jobs will be created when we allow American consumers to choose intelligently, as they are perfectly capable of doing. And as a matter of fact, John, I happen to have introduced a bill in Congress to encourage the development of green jobs within the private sector by allowing homeowners to make energy-saving improvements on their properties and homes. It can be homeowners or property owners, when they're insured, when they're backed up, when their mortgages are backed up by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Currently not the case. So I care very much about green jobs, but they have to be grown in the right way. The federal government is over and over again has proven itself to be absolutely incapable of growing commercial opportunities. It should stop wasting taxpayer money in that way. It is not the federal government's role.
The Republican nomination, it's been several weeks since we've talked about it, Nan, and you beat me up the last time, telling me to look very closely at Mitt Romney. You were right, all right? Now I'm looking very closely at Mitt Romney, and everybody I talk to is looking very closely at Mitt Romney.
I'm not one to gloat.
What are we watching for? What is it that Mitt Romney needs to answer? Why is the Republican Party as a whole holding back, still fragmenting its vote? What in Mitt Romney should we watch?
Mitt Romney clearly would make. I think there's very little doubt that Governor Romney would make a highly competent chief executive. I think what people want to see from him, and I think he is developing that piece of the presidential candidate portfolio. What people want to see is a passion for the job. And I think that's because his nature, I think, is to be a cautious, careful, measured executive, that he has not he hasn't projected the same kind of charismatic image that President Reagan did. And I think we very much want to see that we want to fall in love with our candidate.
Does he know this? You've talked to the candidate many times. Is he aware that we're holding back, that there's another piece we're waiting for?
I have met the governor a couple of times, and in person he is exceedingly gracious and warm. So he certainly is entirely capable of projecting a very charming and favorable persona. I think he probably is aware of that particular challenge. I think anybody looking at the Republican field can see that people do want to have that sense that here's a man who can lead the charge.
Right. 64 years old, we're going to give him a lot of power if we make him president of the United States. You think he's responsible, but
Yes.
we're still waiting. It's just testing. All right. Nan Hayworth of 19 New York. When we come back, we're going to discuss the other missing piece, which is the President of the United States, his re-election campaign for 2012, what we see of it now. I'm John Batchelor with Nan Hayworth. This is The John Batchelor Show.